So with that, let me introduce today's presentation. It is the Longenecker Horticultural Gardens. David Garrison Stevens is the curator and the presenter today. For those that were not at the recent regional meeting in Madison, David has provided a little bit of background information about the gardens. It was created in 1937 with a planting of eastern white pine. Now, Longenecker Horticultural Gardens contains the largest and most diverse conifer collection in Wisconsin. It is uniquely situated on a glacial drumlin. The collection presents over 560 conifer taxa from around the world. Conifers have been planted out individually, allowing them to attain their ultimate form and size as specimens. And far from being static, new specimens continue to be added yearly. It keeps the collection current and makes return visits a must. David's presentation will cover the garden's evolution and highlight a number of the unique plants found within it. And with that, I will turn it over to David Stevens and ask that everyone during the presentation please remain muted.
All right, I'll see if I can make this happen here. All right, well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in this morning and giving me the opportunity to present a little bit about our garden located in Madison, Wisconsin. We will jump into it here. Again, we kind of asked, I asked that folks hold their questions till the end. If there's something pressing, if you just need to know what specimen we may be looking at, feel free to jump in there and ask me that. This is a view from the top of that glacial drumlin, looking down. That's probably the most visited bench in the gardens. And I'm gonna down here. For folks that haven't been to the UW Arboretum, we are 1,240 acres situated right within the city of Madison. We're 2 miles from campus. We've got campus over here, and you can see the Capitol over here as well. Our official date of incorporation was 1934, although there were a few things that occurred prior to that. A lot of folks don't realize we also have 517 acres of additional offsite properties that are spread throughout the state, primarily in southern Wisconsin, although we have a large piece in northern Wisconsin. Those were given to the Arboretum because they all contain unique ecosystems, whether that be prairie remnants, unique forest types, things of that nature. Our claim to fame, really, other than Longenecker in the world, is we have the first prairie restoration in the world on the property. And because of that, we are considered the birthplace of ecological restoration. We are free and open to the public year round, so we're a gateless garden, which has some challenges, especially being right in Madison. And before COVID, we estimated our visitorship at roughly 1 million folks a year. Since COVID came in, that has increased dramatically. We stayed open throughout the pandemic. Our state natural resources closed down all the state parks, which amplified the amount of visitorship we had. We actually had to shut down our entry road because we had so many walkers and bikers that it just was no longer safe. If you were to come out this time of year, we are snow covered, and we're a hot spot for people to cross country ski as well as snowshoe. Let me see. There we go. Here's a rundown of the actual 1,240 acres within Madison. We do have 17 miles of trails throughout the property. We're also broken up into 50 different management units, and you can kind of get a sense of here. We've got various prairies, marshes, woodlands, etc. And the property also contains 21 Native American effigy mounds. And we'll be talking about this garden right here. And the effigy mounds are spread out in the forest surrounding that. We do not do any real we don't publicize this much. And we work with our local indigenous tribe, the Ho-Chunk, to do any type of restoration. So we allow them to work on these. We do not want to desecrate them in any way. If you folks had never seen the Curtis Prairie, here it is. So this is that first prairie restoration in the world. It was named for John Curtis, who was a professor of botany at the University of Wisconsin, Madison, and he was a researcher out at the Arboretum for the majority of his career. He's probably best known for writing The Vegetation of Wisconsin, where he was able to go through with grad students and document all of our native plant species, whether they be herbaceous or woody. And with that, we are the first place in the world that actually studied fire. We know that the indigenous cultures used fire to create and manage the prairies, but it was never really understood from a scientific standpoint. And this is that original article written by John Curtis. This is obviously set up for a photo shoot down here. This is Aldo Leopold, who was our director of research from our inception till his untimely passing. If he was really out here, I don't think his white pants would be white, but it is fascinating. So this is one of the first burns, and these are burns that we still do on the Curtis Prairie, which is pretty difficult. One of my jobs at the Arboretum is actually part of the burn crew, which not everybody that curates Arboreta has an opportunity to do. Here's an overview of the actual Longenecker garden section of the Arboretum. These gardens were actually established in 1935, so a year after the Arboretum ribbon cutting. Kind of a clunky name, but they were named for G. William Longenecker, who was the Arboretum's original director, as well as the first garden curator. The gardens as they exist now are about 38 acres and currently house over 2,600 different taxa of woody plants. And while we do have almost all of the woody species native to Wisconsin, we also have things from around the world that are hardy in our climate. And really what it was set up to do is to offer a living laboratory for the university community, the state as a whole, to research and experience woody plants appropriate for our region. Again, we'll be talking about the section here that we refer to as the Pinetum. We do have other conifers spread throughout, or rather here and there in the gardens, but we'll concentrate on that. Everybody's heard Longenecker Gardens, but nobody knows really who that was named for. So here is G. William Longenecker, actually helping with a little bit of grounds maintenance. I don't know how he found the time. As I mentioned, not only was he the curator, but he was also the Arboretum's director. He was both a professor of horticulture at UW, as well as the first chair of the Department of Landscape Architecture. Again, I don't know how he found that type of time. To give you a sense of what he inherited in 1934-35, this is what that landscape looked like. Again, here is the university. The Capitol wasn't built yet. And And you can see it was all older farmland for the most that had been slowly bought up. Here is Longenecker Gardens, and this will be the section we'll talk about. If folks haven't been here, you'll be surprised to know that this is now a 6-lane highway right here, the Beltline, and that was not an issue in Longenecker's time. And this gives you a little bit of a sense of what that property looks like today. So to get to this point, Longenecker, not only does he really set out where things would be planted in the garden, just kind of an overview of that. He was also instrumental in deciding where the prairies would go, where the forest would go, and whatnot. We own most of the property. This is the smallest of the lakes in Madison. This is Lake Wingra, and we own most of the property around this. This was part of an endeavor by a gentleman named Michael Olbrich. If folks have been to Madison, you have most likely been over to Olbrich Botanical Garden, and that was named for Michael. Michael, in the 1920s, saw that development was occurring at a rapid pace in Madison, and he feared that the average person would not have access to the lakes, that they would all be private property. So his intent was to buy property and get investors to help him do that, to ensure that there would be access to the lakes in perpetuity. So Olbrich Botanical Garden and the associated park, Olbrich Park there, and our UW Arboretum are all due to Michael Olbrich. So I wanted to give him a thank you out there. Well, Longenecker, as I said, was the first chair of landscape architecture. And so indeed, he had plans for the entire property. But how do you put those plans into action in 1934 during the Depression? Well, he was lucky enough to have these folks. So the CCC, or the Civilian Conservation Corps, was a huge part of the development of the UW Arboretum. If folks weren't familiar with it, here's a little overview, but it was part of Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal to provide jobs, and this was only for young men. They really either had to be single or below a certain age, and having difficulty finding jobs. Believe it or not, they were paid $1 a day or $30 a month. And part of the stipulation was $25 of their $30 had to be sent back to their families to help them get through the Great Depression. It was named Camp Arboretum, and we had 200 men stationed there between 1935 and 1941. And these are pictures of that camp. We have one of these structures still on the property, as well as a few other pieces of architecture that they also built. But what they really did for us was create the Arboretum's infrastructure. So the roads, stone walls, those 17 acres of trails, and they also helped with the initial plantings. And indeed, they were responsible for some of the first conifers planted on the property. I can't even imagine trying to plant a conifer in this fashion today, but they seem to do it. There's other pictures, and they were more than happy to do that. So these, we can see a white spruce and a red pine here were planted in other sections of the Arboretum in the early days. To our pinetum itself, as was mentioned, it is planted on a glacial drumlin. So we are in a glaciated part of Wisconsin. And what was discovered is that this glacial drumlin contains more acidic soil than all the rest of the garden. So it's about 6.5 in the pH range, and it is quite sandy. Where the rest of the gardens are more of a clay loam. If people aren't familiar with a glacial drumlin. I'm from the East Coast, and it was new to me when I moved out here in 1991. It is a gently sloping hill that was created by a glacier. So glaciers worked as bulldozers. And so as they moved forward, they pushed soil and sediment in front of them. And as they melted back, they dropped that as they went. So in these glacial landscapes, we get very variable soil types in small areas. The first trees planted in the Pinetum were 1937, and they're these large white pine on top. The first plants in the garden were actually lilacs that were planted on April 19th, 1935. So it took a little bit longer to get some conifers in here. Additional taxa were added in the 50s and 60s by William Longenecker. And then starting in 1976 and continuing through today, additional conifers have been added yearly. Our current collection actually has over 600 specimens with over 560 taxa represented. As we can see here from the map, all accessions are GPSed and mapped. We also label all of our specimens, and we do have the origin or we know the origin of all these as well. Well, something happened between the early 60s and 1976, and that something was this dashing man here. Edward, as we know him, Ed Hasselkiss, took over. Ed was a student of G. William Longenecker and was tapped by him to become the next curator. So Ed came on in 1966 and would continue as the curator for nearly 50 years. And what some folks don't realize is those last 20, 25 years, Ed did that as a volunteer. He was an emeritus professor at that point, but his love of plants and that landscape kept him coming back. Ed taught over 3,000 undergraduate students during his career as a horticulture professor at UW. And he also had 45 graduate students during that time. I will let you know, I was 44 of the 45 graduate students. I came up here in 1991 from Dallas, Texas, where I worked at the Dallas Arboretum in its infancy to get my master's with Ed. And Ed has gone on to be an incredible mentor to me and a good friend. So really, the person we have to thank for the Conifer Collection and really for most of the plantings in the Longenecker Horticultural Gardens are due to Ed. What I call the gardens oftentimes is the Longenecker Hasselkiss Gardens, because I think that is really how the gardens were created. So a little sense of what Ed would inherit when he first came on in 1966. Here is that Conifer Collection, or soon to be. In 1968, just a couple of years after Ed came on board, we can see those white pine up top here. There are a few scattered plantings of conifers here and there. Well, in 1976, Ed decided it was about time for the gardens to have a very robust conifer collection, and he began planting every year. So here is that collection just after a couple of years of Ed's attention to it. And you can see there's a lot of native plant material here, primarily sumac that's being pushed back to get that in there. By 1984, you can see that collection is starting to take much more form. Again, we can see the drumlin a little more defined here. And if you were to come out today, this is what would greet you. So it's really been an amazing transformation that's taken place in the gardens. And again, being in Wisconsin, we not only look at what that landscape is going to be in the growing season, but also what it's going to offer us in that winter landscape. And this winter's been amazing in that we've had a couple of weeks of freezing fog, which has really made the conifers incredibly ornate as they hold on to that. Want to give a shout out to the Conifer Society, the Central Region. In particular here, we became a reference garden in 2015. And that was the year I did come and become the curator. I had worked the previous 14 years for the Department of Forest and Wildlife Ecology on campus. And I was involved in tree breeding. I specifically was working with our 3 native pine species, as well as white spruce. So I had quite a bit of experience with conifers at that time. Why did it take so long between Ed's retirement and my hiring? And the reason is because previously, both Ed and G. William Longenecker were professors, as I had mentioned, so their salaries were paid for by their departments. The Arboretum is quite small in staff. We looked at the 1,240 acres plus 517 offsite acres. Well, right now there are 2 of us that take care of the Longenecker Gardens, and we only have 4 folks that take care of the rest of the property. So we are a bit understaffed, if you will, but I think we do some amazing things with the staff we have. As well. But in any case, back to my story, during about the 25 years after Ed's retirement, they needed to build up endowment to create the actual job of curator and be able to pay for that. So that was kind of a lag between Ed's retirement and my hiring. We also received a $1,500 grant in 2018 from the Central Region ACS, and that allowed us to buy all of the material to make display labels. So one of the issues when I came on board really was we had this amazing collection, but it was extremely difficult to find our small, discrete accession tags. So over the last couple of years, we've really focused on making these 3x5 inch display tags. So I think if you come out now, you can fairly quickly identify what you're looking at. Wanted to give you a couple of just pictures of the collection. Here's a aerial focusing more on our Colorado blue spruce collection here. Some of the Norway, or no, they're not Norway, but Mugo pines, few other things. We can see those original white pine still dominating that hilltop. We have quite a nice larch collection, 16 different selections or specimens out there right now. We do have benches throughout. This has been a nice way to help us raise funds. We worked with a local artist who created a very distinctive bench that highlights the plant material found on the property, both woodies and prairie species there. Again, we don't have a designated landscape crew, so I actually did this all myself, just with rock on the property. This was quite a slope here as well. And if folks have not been out to the Arboretum, they may be shocked or intrigued, depending on how it goes, to find that we have an incredibly large population of wild turkeys. When I came up to the gardens to get my master's with Ed and did my research out in the gardens in 1991, there was not a turkey to be seen on the property. So turkeys were actually hunted to extinction in Wisconsin by 1900. And our Department of Natural Resources attempted 3 different times to reintroduce them to the Wisconsin landscape. The first two times failed because they attempted to do it like we raise chickens at home by buying eggs, hatching them out, incubating them, getting them to the right size where they molted and could live on the landscape. They then put them out there, and the turkeys had no idea how to live in the wild and perished quite quickly. So in the late 1970s, our Department of Natural Resources worked with the state of Missouri and actually wild collected by netting a small population of turkeys that were released in a few spots around the state. At this point now in 2020, turkeys can be found in all 72 counties of Wisconsin, something that was not true back before 1900. They're even found up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where they're considered actually an invasive species because they were not there prior to European development here. But they become more and more robust throughout the Arboretum. So I actually got my undergraduate degree at Virginia Tech. And while we're unfortunately known as the Hokies, our actual mascot is the fighting gobbler. So I'm quite fond of the turkeys. They create a little bit of damage, mainly in our crabapple collection when they go to eat the fruit. But in all, I don't see much damage to them. And it's just never ceases to amaze how taken people are with them because you can get really up close and personal with them. Well, I thought we would look at a few of the unique specimens we've got, some things that either I get a lot of questions about or things that I really like out in the gardens. The first is the Manchurian Fur. We received this in 2001, and this came to us from Chris Bachtel, who is a vice president down at the Morton Arboretum. And he actually went over to Manchuria and wild collected there. So this came directly from seed, wild collected in Heilongjiang. I'll try to pronounce this, Heilongjiang province, China, which would be in the northern section. And I think this is a real up and coming conifer. I think it's going to offer some things that some others can't, especially as we see more damage to needle cast and other fungal diseases. So this is one to keep your eye out for. It's not really readily available at this point, but I think it's ripe for an introduction. The other is the snake-branched Norway spruce. This one's been around in the trade for quite some time, I think dating back to the late 1800s. People are always just amazed by this. This actually, you can go underneath it here. Just a great spot for young children, very mysterious and unique. We received this one in 1982. I was going to put a picture near, but did not. You can imagine what this looks like right now with that frozen frost on it, just almost magical. This is looking up onto that glacial drumlin. We call this the overview area of the collection of conifers. This is gold lace juniper. I think this one's quite dazzling. We received this in 1992. One of the reasons I wanted to put this in, I'm going to put a question out for folks for a little maybe insight you might be able to offer us. We have had real issues over about the last 12 or so years on these ground-hugging conifers with voles. They've really done a number on this area. We have a lot of native raptors and whatnot, so we really don't have the option of using any type of poison. Snap traps and that thing are a little just too difficult for us. Again, we have so many visitors in the winter months that it's hard to put traps out here that would be obvious to folks. So at the end, I'd appreciate if folks could share any techniques they may be using to help reduce their vole populations and that damage they're doing in the winter months here. Over on the right here is the golden Oriental spruce. This was what ours looked like first thing in the spring, just absolutely dazzling with those yellow tips. They will fade, folks aren't familiar with it a bit as the season progresses, but I think just a fabulous plant in the landscape, just almost lights up. Couple of unique ones to our gardens here. I wish I had a bit of a better picture here. We'll work on that. But this is the Tromner spruce, Piscea Xtrometer. It is unique to the Longenecker Gardens. We received it in 1967 from Alan Tromner. Alan Tromner was a employee in the forestry department, as it was known back then. And he had a small nursery on the side. And Alan had the idea of taking the Serbian spruce and crossing it with the Colorado blue spruce. In this case, he used the cultivar Coster to see what he would get. And indeed, he got something very unique. So what we see here is he retained the architecture, those sweeping side branches of the Serbian parent, but he got from the blue spruce this more extreme glaucous blue coloration to the tips here. So Alan gave these to Ed Hasselkus in 1967. And Ed planted these out here. And in 2015, when I came on board, Ed and I worked to get this named for Alan. So if it ever goes out in the trade, this is how it would be known. So Alan had passed by 2015, but I was able to contact his widow, who at that point was 91 years old. I remembered well this plant and Alan giving it to Ed. And was delighted. So we had it registered with the Royal Horticultural Society, as well as the American Conifer Society in Alan's name. We're just in the infancy, but I'm working with the Morton Arboretum right now to get this released through the Chicagoland's Grows program. So hopefully in the next few years, this will be out in the trade. One thing of note we are seeing is that it is showing no susceptibility to the fungal issues, so needle cast in particular, that is really devastating the Colorado blue spruce in our region, and then certainly further east as well. So this is one to keep your eye out, and here are the two original plants from Alan. Over here to the right is the Siberian fir, one of the most shade tolerant and cold hardy conifers in the world. This was brought to us by Hugh Iltus. Hugh was a very well-known and highly respected botanist. He was the curator of the botany herbarium for well over 30 years. And Hugh lived, actually, we have a few houses or a small housing development that is kind of grandfathered into the Arboretum's property. And Hugh lived there for the latter part of his life. Well, Hugh was originally from what was known as Russia. And in the late 70s, early 80s, he took sabbatical from his job and spent time in Siberia. Anywhere he would go in the world, he would always take various samples for herbarium specimens. Well, one thing he did here was take some cones, he brought them back, and he gave a few of the seed to Ed, and Ed was able to grow these out. So these came directly from Siberia. We know they're from the Krasnoyarsk district of Siberia. They've done fabulously well for us. So these, the plant itself was put out in 1981. We have 2 of these, and they've done remarkably well for us. Siberian fir is getting a lot of attention currently because of an essential oil made from the tips. It's kind of now in vogue for aromatherapy. So another kind of interesting little factoid about that plant. A couple of others that folks I'm no doubt are familiar with, but are kind of unique for us. The one here is a 20-year-old Silberlock Korean fir. Just absolutely stunning. And I put it in here, not because it may be new to you, but it was quite interesting when we did do a tour, a regional tour for the American Conifer Society a couple of years ago. Virtually everybody on the tour had commented that none of them had seen this cultivar this large. So it was sited by Ed, just I think in a fantastic spot, and it's just really thrived. So I get a lot of questions from folks on this. We can't see it in this picture, but just next to it, we have the straight species. So you really get a great juxtaposition of what this cultivar really has to offer and how it is simply a genetic variation there of that. The one to the right here, we love to show whenever we tour. Again, not the most unique in the world, but it is unique in Madison, Wisconsin. So this was received in 1992. And at this point, even though it is not considered reliably hardy in zone 5, in many cases, we're more of a zone 4 at the gardens, where certainly the city of Madison's a 5. So this particular specimen is actually seen minus 38 degrees Fahrenheit. And as you can see, absolutely no damage to it. So Ed will tell you the story that he had a rather pushy salesperson who assured him and talked him into purchasing 2 of these. And both of Ed and I are both glad that he did. So again, just an absolutely splendid specimen all these years later out here. And this one's pretty close to the Siberian fir we just saw. So it fruited for the first time this year. We've got quite a cone collection up here. We've brought in a sister plant, wintergreen is that cultivar. And both of these minus 29 degrees Fahrenheit a couple of winters ago. Again, absolutely no damage to them, although they are in a rather protected spot, so they're not getting those strong westerly winds. Couple of others to look at here. We'll kind of close with. Again, I mentioned that we have quite a amazing collection of larches. The one that never ceases to have a fantastic fall color is the Olga Bay Larch that we see here. This one's not that well known, but I think it's another one that may offer, especially for us in the north, a lot of potential for selection. This one was given to us by the Holden Arboretum, but we know that it was wild collected in Manchuria at a higher elevation, 800 meters is what I've got here. The Olga Bay Larch was named for a water body in the former Soviet Union. It is one of the most cold hardy conifers known. Has seen some incredibly cold Siberian winters. But again, for us, even sometimes this will color up better than our native Larix laricina. Just outstanding conifer. Another one over here, I wanted to get more of its architecture here. So I took this just a couple of days ago. This is the Polish larch. Again, kind of unique to the gardens. This one was propagated from seed given to Ed from Theodore Kozlowski. Ted, as he was known at that point, was the Department of Forestry chair. And I think you can probably figure out by his last name, he was from Polish origin. And so Ted went over to Poland on sabbatical in the early to mid 70s. And quite similar to what Hugh Iltus did, he went and collected seeds. So the Polish larch is only native to the highlands of Poland. It is actually now on the Endangered Species Act there, known as the Red List. In Europe, there's been a lot of habitat loss, a lot of timber as well. So this was actually would have been harvested just as seed. So it does have a little snapshot of some of the genetic diversity of the subspecies, or rather variety. It goes back and forth between subspecies and variety, currently considered a variety of it. What makes it unique from the standard species is that the cones are about half the size, so much more dainty. The new growth on it in the spring is extremely light colored, almost white, and it has slightly more pendulous branchlets. I think that's debatable, but it is unique. And this one I get quite a few questions about throughout the year. It really stands out to us, and we can see it right next to our native larch as well. All right, I thought I only had 40 minutes here. I hope I didn't rush through too much, but give you a sense of what our gardens look like if you were to enter right now. This was just taken last week. We do have an entrance on the northern side of it. And just about 2016, 2017, after I came on, I was lucky enough to work with some donors who were generous enough to help us create a formalized entrance into these gardens. So if folks haven't been here before and you don't want to walk through the entirety of our garden, you can park just across the street from these. Here, you can see we've shown our plaque here. I didn't want to just put it on a metal post, so we used a older juniper that we had taken off the property here, and this became a huge issue for us. Climbing trees is one of our common sights, and we try to keep especially kids out of them. But boy, oh boy, during the COVID increase in visitorship, I think half the people who came into the gardens were in the trees. So this seems to have worked out to keep folks from getting up in there. And with that, I'll end, and you can see how we do change in the seasons. And this is that opening spot as it looks right now. All right, and with that, if anybody does have questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer those for you.
David, thank you very much. That was a great presentation. And we do have questions in the chat. So continue to put your questions in the chat. And if Sherry and Juniper will collect those from the chat and present them, David will give us the answers. We did have a solution, incidentally, to the voles in there.
Excellent. All right, I'm not seeing those, but perhaps I can.
Byron, I'm not sure how to do that. This is Sherry.
Okay, sure. Well, here we go. I've got it.
Oh, good.
All right.
I think the first question that came in was a question about your tags,
Yes.
about how you made your tags, and I thought you addressed that, but someone had a question.
Sure. So we have, and I didn't show a picture of that, but if you come out, you'll find two different labels on the specimens. The first is one that Ed instituted, and we continue to use today, and that's an accession tag. And it's made out of copper, is fairly small, about 1 inch by 3. And we are actually using an addressograph. It looks like an old typewriter. It is an old typewriter with a embossing kind of contraption, if you will, added to it. And it dates back to the early 40s and was used to make dog tags during World War II and really through Vietnam. So we use that to emboss our tags for the accessions. But what we're using now to make these display tags is a laser engraver. So we have a smaller laser engraver that can handle a 12 by 18 sheet, and we can engrave on anything from wood, plastic, or in this case, I want to give a shout out to the Green Bay Botanical Gardens. They actually are the ones that gave me the idea of using anodized aluminum. It seems like everybody else in our area, Olbrich and Allen Centennial and some of those folks were using plastic, which really wasn't working too great. We tried that on a few of our deciduous. But we're using a small laser engraver made here in the US. And if folks want to get a better rundown of the actual one we're using and stuff, you can give me shoot me an email. I see I neglected to put my email on here, but it's pretty easy. It's D Stevens, DSTEVENS @WISC, so the first 4 letters of Wisconsin.edu. Or you can go to our website and you'll see a drop down with all of our employees, and you'll see my name in there. But that's what we're using, a laser engraver. And we've gone on beyond that, and now we're starting to make some 12 by 12 interpretive signs and stuff. So you'll see more of those in the garden seasonally as well.
Sherry, did you have another question loaded?
Yes, Steve Murray also asked, will you have drone flights over and through the collection?
I didn't catch that. A light?
Drone flights.
Yeah, so because we're part of the university has a no drone flying. So it's been an issue for us. We have had a number of pictures taken by a researcher on campus and working with the Forest and Wildlife Ecology Department. This is where forestry has gone, where they're looking to be able to identify species and the health of species by taking these high definition drone photos and then looking at them using a variety of filters. So this last summer, we had probably 5 drone flights, and they did it at different growing parts of the growing season. And then they had students come in and actually take cuttings of certain species and then they did a nutritional analysis. In any case, long response. Some have been taken. We've not received those drone pictures, but my hope is here in the next couple of months, we'll have some high definition drone photos. The ones that I showed a little bit earlier were actually predated drones. In the mid-90s, we had a helicopter come over and they took a few photos of various parts of the Arboretum.
Okay, and Byron asks, do you treat your blue spruce for needle cast disease?
Yeah, with us here at the Arboretum, because of our small staff, and because of the fact we can't shut the Arboretum down, we can't close off anywhere to visitors, and people are here from daybreak all the way till dark, and actually after dark. We really can't safely spray. So we have not sprayed for needle cast since really the beginning of the Arboretum. We do treat in some cases things that we can use a systemic or something that we can isolate within the specimen. We are spraying, the only thing we do spray for at this point is magnolia scale, and that's because we can use just a dormant oil that has no toxicity if it were to drift onto somebody.
Barbara asked if you prune your conifers because they're so nicely shaped.
Yeah, so Ed, he was really adamant about allowing the conifers in particular, but even a lot of the deciduous trees to grow at will, really to attain their full form all the way to the ground. So we do some pruning in the collection, but especially on the conifers, we do just a minimal amount. Certainly any kind of damage, any outlying or vigorous growth that is starting to hurt the form, we will prune there. But in general, especially on the conifers, we don't do a ton of it, but we certainly do some shaping. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Sylvia Popelka, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, but she asked that she has a Norway spruce that's very much like your variegata, your snake branch.
Yes.
Norway, and she wonders how she could find out if in fact that's what she has.
So there are two older, there are two forms of that, and I'm drawing a blank right now, but there is the variegata, and somebody else maybe we could pitch in too. We have the other as well. I want to say the cultivar begins with an A. The variegata sweeps up at the tips where the other form does not. If she sends me a picture of hers, I would be more than happy to identify it for her. But those two have been out in the trade, boy, since the late 1800s, both originating in Europe. But it's really looking at the difference between those two cultivars. If she's got the really extreme pendulous branching, those are the two most common on the market.
Yeah, just as information, Dave and I have a Piscea aves cobra, and that really comes down. Is that the other one?
It is not. So that sounds like maybe another selection of these two that, of course, there's so much variation in the Norway spruce. I'm not familiar with cobra, but it sounds like it's probably, again, similar to variegata, where it's more of that upturned end. But that's one I will need to look up, and perhaps we need to add that.
No, it's actually long and snake-like and very ugly, but he likes it.
Okay. Yeah, I always say some year I want to do a Halloween tour through the Longenecker Gardens, and that Snake Branch will be one that we will certainly highlight. You can almost see it in the front lawn of the Adams family.
Right. Okay. And
I
Steve
have
Murray. Oh,
I-
sorry.
cobra. I have seen cobra in somebody's garden, and I actually like it. So I guess beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It is very unusual. Yeah.
I have cobra. I love it.
What is that?
She has cobra also.
Mhm. Okay, well, a lot of
Great.
people like to look. The next question, or actually, Steve Murray says coyotes eat a lot of voles.
Yeah, so we have coyotes. Not
How
enough
does
of
it
them.
busy?
Yeah, we got coyotes. I have hawks. I've got owls. The problem is in the winter they hide, in those creeping junipers, and then once they lose their winter food supply, they start, of course, girdling, and they don't like to come out into the open.
Right. Okay. You can put mouse traps under 3-gallon pots over an active run overnight, baited with peanut butter, and we've caught up to 3 in one night.
Okay, I like the
That-
idea of under the bucket. That's great. Keeps the snow off it, and we normally put on any of our traps of research in progress. Please do not disturb, or we do get people who want to take a look.
That's a good idea. Steve Murray asks, are you able to propagate those? I would take one. I'm not sure what he's referring to.
I believe that was to the blue spruce cultivar that you registered.
Yeah, the Tromner.
Oh,
So
Yes.
at this point, we are pretty small scale. Again, it's myself and my technician. We have an antiquated greenhouse that if you want to find mice on the property, that's where to look. So as I mentioned, we're working with Chicagoland Grows program. We'll actually be taking some cyanwood cuttings next month from Tromner, and we're working with a nursery in Illinois who will be propagating those. If all goes well, I'm hoping they'll be released under the Chicagoland Grows program. So they would do all the propagation. They would all do all of the advertising, et cetera, for us. Again, we're pretty skeletal crew. So my hope is that they'd be out there in the marketplace here in the near future. As people know, in woody plant introduction, things don't go super duper fast like they would with corn or annuals. But we started the process. So I hope to see that in the marketplace.
okay. And Sylvie asked, what zone is Madison?
Well, like I had mentioned, we're kind of that, if you were to look on the latest USDA, we'd be in that 5A, sometimes 5B. Ed will tell you, we were really more in that 4. We
Yeah.
get a lot colder. We're a lot more open to the winds and the elements. So we can see some pretty cold and intense temperatures here. So like I said, 2 winters ago, we went down to -29, and that's from a thermometer in right next to the collection. And we've seen down to -38 Fahrenheit. So certainly what Olbrich can grow across town, they're right on the lake. They're almost a zone different than us,
Really?
which is just crazy, I know, but you get that lake effect. We really don't get much of an effect from the small Lake Wingra.
Mhm.
So they're right between our two large lakes, Monona and Mendota.
Mhm.
So that's oftentimes people look, see all the Japanese maples they're growing over there, try to grow them. We've never been able to grow Japanese maple for more than a few years until they winter kill. So that kind of shows you the difference between that climatic zones, even in the Madison area.
That's interesting. Steve Murray says he just hates pushy conifer sail slopes. Haha. His Cydiopodus, I believe, is 6 foot tall. How tall is yours?
Yeah, I should have had somebody standing in front of it. I am going to give you a sense. It is, I just took a picture and I'm going to actually, if I can work this thing, I'll show you a person standing in front of it. Certainly well over 20. I give it somewhere in the 25 feet or taller, and it actually, you can see a little snow on it. And I don't know if, can you see that on my screen?
No.
No.
Yeah, it shows pretty well.
Yeah, so there it is with somebody standing right in front of it. And that was last week. So you get a sense it is a pretty nice size.
Yeah,
Certainly nothing like you might see out at the San Francisco Botanical Garden, but it's pretty impressive.
he's showing this on his own video screen, not on the share screen on the Zoom.
Right. Unfortunately, I don't have that
okay.
book. So instead of my ugly mug, you can see it there. So yeah, I'd probably say about 25 feet.
We have a cultivar Joe Cozy that's about 8 foot tall.
Okay.
And have you had trouble with yours being uprooted by the wind? We've had
No.
problems for a couple of years now, and we've had to stake them.
Wow. Yeah, again, Ed, knowing it was going to be marginally hardy, put it in quite a protected spot. So to the west, where the majority of our winds in the northwest, it's got a nice conifer screen there, primarily those Siberian fir, which just shrug off our winter winds. And like I think I mentioned, in 2015, we added the cultivar wintergreen. That one's about 4.5 feet, but again, we've seen no winter damage to that. And it definitely is a little bit brighter green this time of year than the species.
Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much the questions I have. There are a couple of people said thank you, and thank you for the great presentation.
My pleasure.
A couple additional questions that came in late.
Sure.
On the Piscea abies virgata, does that need to be staked? And if so, for how long?
Yeah, see, we really minimal. We really do very little staking in the collection. I mean, prior to my coming on, you had Ed as the volunteer, and then we had one dedicated person to just doing the maintenance out there. We do a little bit of staking, but very little. Since I've been here, since 2015, I've just ended my 6th growing season. I can name on one hand what I've staked. So we don't do a lot. But again, at this point, with mature trees around, we don't see a lot of extreme wind throw either.
David, Mark Butler wanted to know, from a visitor standpoint, if they are looking to see a specific tree or specimen, is there an online way to locate it or a directory?
Yes, most unfortunately, it's been on my top list right after labeling for the last 6 years. We haven't gotten there yet, but my hope is, and I saw one of our ardent volunteers, Jane LaFlash, was on, who would be helping us do this. My hope would be in the next year to year and a half to have a actual botanical database. Right now, all of our stuff's just in an access database that we're not able to share with. So my hope is to get a newer one that would have a map component to it. So you'd be able to bring up our entire collection online, click on the specimen and actually have it mapped for you. And then you'd also be able to do that on your cell phone.
Whoa.
So we're not there yet, but do check back with us, or better yet, perhaps I will put something out to the Conifer Society once we get that up and running, that it's now available. So Iris BG for Botanical Garden, is right now kind of the state of the art. A lot of the other gardens around the country and really the world are starting to use it. Unfortunately, I was just about to pull the trigger on that, and our database manager took another job on the university, so we don't have somebody dedicated yet. But I'm starting to mull around in my mind, seeing if we can get a student from campus in the computer science department to kind of come to hire on a limited term to help us transfer all that data and get that up and rolling. So the quick answer is no, but the long answer is coming soon.
That exhausts the questions in the chat.
Okay.
Do any of the participants have any further questions? If you do, please unmute and just say them out loud.
David, this is Tracy Blevins, and you might want to contact me. We work with a lot of arboreta,
Okay.
and we do exactly what you just said. And so you don't have to recreate the wheel.
Sure.
So, my name is Tracy Blevins, and you can find me through the Conifer Society or anybody on here, Juniper or anybody. And I can.
So your last name, could you spell that?
Sure, it's Blevins. B as in boy, Levins.
Okay, great.
Are there any other further questions?
I would just like David to repeat his email.
Yeah, you bet. So it's just like my name, D Stevens, DSTEVENS. And that would be at WISC, so WISC, and then .edu, short for education. So dstevens@wisc.edu. One of the things, I've been with the university now going on 20 years. I was the first David Stevens when they went to computers and emails. So I've been able to retain that email.
And all lowercase.
Doesn't matter. Do
Okay.
either way, they'll accept either way. My email shifted 3 times, but that's the easiest one. And it'll all come to my current email address. Yep.
Are there any other questions? With that, David, thank you very much. A tremendous presentation. On a cold winter day, it sure does warm us up. We'll have some brief announcements. David, if you would stop your screen share, please, so we can see faces.
Yeah. Let's see. I can get out of this. All right, where am I? Whoops, I went the wrong way. Huh.
You should, yeah, the green insert from Zoom that says you're sharing.
Yeah.
You might have to move your cursor to the top of the screen to see that.
Yep, I've got it. Yeah, I'm usually not on a Mac, which I'm on. That's gonna be my excuse here. I want to leave the meeting.
Well, while
Stop
you're
share.
there,
Got it.
very good. David Speth, he had a lot of announcements at our last presentation. So for those of you that weren't at the last presentation, David, can you do some of the highlights about the Conifer College and the national meetings in Iowa?
Yeah, sure. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thanks, Byron. Basically, the American Conifer Society has decided to cancel the National Convention and the Conifer College that were planned for Clinton, Iowa this year. We just felt that under the circumstances, it would be too risky to have a successful event. So they have both been canceled. The folks in Iowa are organizing a open air rendezvous that some of you may be interested in. The open air rendezvous will not have any indoor activities, will not have any buses. It's strictly an informal gathering that will include all of the gardens that were planned for the convention's bus tour. So if you're interested in seeing the gardens that were planned, this is an opportunity with the Iowa rendezvous. The Iowa rendezvous is scheduled for June. Registration is required, and we'll be having some information out shortly if you're interested. One other thing that we noticed was that the Conifer College was extremely popular amongst people that had registered early. We had over 100 registrations for the Conifer College long before the deadline. And with the postponement and the cancellation, we were all very discouraged that we wouldn't be able to offer something that was perceived, I think, to be beneficial. So what we're planning right now is to run the Conifer College in 2022 as part of our Dayton, Ohio Central Region Convention. I know 2022 is a long way off, and we'll be getting much more information as that date approaches. But if you're interested in what we were doing for the Conifer College, we are planning to run it in Dayton in 2022. Obviously, more information will be available as we proceed. So the American Conifer Society is very disappointed that we were not able to run the events in 2021. We hope that if you have an interest, you might be able to participate in the open air event this year and in the Dayton Conifer College in 2022.
One more announcement of thank yous. A thank you to Sherry Speth and Jennifer Harvey. Volunteered their time. You got admitted by them. They've tracked the questions in the chat, etc. So it's an important function, and it allowed David to concentrate on making his presentation. So thanks to both of them. Jennifer is also an officer in the Southeast region. Jennifer, did you have an announcement or two for your region?
Yeah, I do, Byron. I'm going to share my screen quickly. Do you see it now?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, perfect. Bear with me a second. So the Southeast Regional meeting, we're going to have an open air rendezvous also, and it will be May 1st. And we are requiring that you are registered too. And people were asking earlier about the email address, and there it is. It's southeastconifers@gmail.com. It's getting kind of late, so I'm just going to say, make sure you register for this meeting because we need to make sure that we're following all the rules and all the regulations, and it's totally outside. We'll have more information. We're still planning things. Things are, all, at this point of life, everything's a little fluid. So But we do have Dr. Solomon's garden, the UT garden at Knoxville, and the Knoxville Botanical Gardens lined up so far. The Southeast region has also been doing some Zoom calls. We are asking our members to participate in the